All right, guys, so we are now on section 2.4, note, simplifying square roots, and we are going to introduce you guys to imaginary numbers, okay? But first, can you guys take a minute or two, and without a calculator, can you please see if you can do simplifying the square roots of all of this from A all the way to T. So the first thing I want to do is square root of 1, guys. Okay, that's going to be 1 times 1. A square root means you're looking for 2 identical numbers, okay? If you can find 2 identical numbers, that means you can simplify it out of the square root symbol, which is 1. I'm going to do a couple of these with you, and then you guys are going to have to do the rest on your own. So let's sort of go all the way down to square root of 225. So 225, if you guys know your times table, then that is going to be really helpful, because 225 is 15 times 15. That is identical set of twins. That means we can simplify one of it out of the radical. And then we can go down to, I'm going to do the last one with you. Square root, guys, of 400 is going to be 20 times 20 is 400. So that means they are identical. That means we can take one of it out. Okay, so your job is, students, to finish up all of these, okay? Now that you guys sort of know how it works, let's try examples 1 to 4. It said simplify. Express each in the simplest radical form and decimal approximation round to the nearest hundredths place. Okay, so that's 2 decimal places. So we have a square root here of, looks like 10,000. So square root of 10,000, 10,000 is going to be 100 times 100. The reason I know is because we have 4 zeros here, and because we have 4 zeros, 100 times 100, that will give us 40. That will give us, okay, well, 2 identical numbers, that's going to come out to be 100. So box that up. We don't need a calculator because this was able to simplify perfectly. So this number 2 right here is unique because, can you guys see that there's a negative in the front? If there's a negative in the front, that's the same thing saying negative 1 times square root of 0.04. And so we're going to simplify it just like normal. So 2 numbers, if possible, multiply equals to 0.04. It has to be 0.2, and I'm going to use parentheses, okay? 0.2 times 0.2, or in my case, I'm writing it as 0.2 times 0.2. If you guys remember, when you guys multiply decimals, right, we have 2 decimal places, so that's why it's 0.04. So that's going to allow us, okay, 2 identical numbers are under the radical. We're able to simplify it out of the radical. So negative 1 times 0.2, final answer is negative 0.2. We don't need a calculator here because we are able to simplify that perfectly. Number 3, there's a plus or minus in the front, guys. So that's going to be the same thing as saying, okay, plus or minus 1 times, okay, times square root of 44. Well, square root of 44, students, I know 4 goes in there. So 4 times 11. 11 is not a perfect root, okay? So what that means is we can simplify out the square root of 4 times square root of 11. Yes, when you have multiple numbers under a radical, we can rewrite them independently. Well, square root of 4 is a perfect 2, so 1 times 2, and then times square root of 11. So plus or minus 2 in the front. This is without the calculator in the simplest radical form. And now I'm also going to use a calculator to punch it in. I don't know what kind of calculator you guys have, so you guys make sure you guys mess around with your own calculator. For my calculator, for me to use the square root symbol, it's this button right here. Let me see if I can use a mouse here. This one, okay? Cannot divide by 0. I don't need to divide by 0. Let's clear that out. Okay, so if I want to do square root of 44, for my calculator, I have to punch in 44 first and then hit a square root number. And so that's going to give us, remember, it wants the nearest hundred, so we want 2 decimal places. So 6.63. We want to look at the 3rd digit here, and if that's 5 or higher, then the second one goes up. But since this is 3, it's going to say a 6.63. So go back to my paper and write in Oh, there you go. But remember we have the plus or minus in the front. So we're going to write plus or minus 6.63 and box that up. Example number 4. Again, there's a negative in the front, guys. So treat it like -1 times square root of 40, okay? And that's going to say -1 square root of 40 is 4 times 10. And so that's going to say -1 times square root of 4 times square root of 10. 10, guys, it's 2 times 5. There's no possible way to get two identical numbers. So that's going to say -1 square root of 4 is perfect 2. Square root of 10, we cannot break it out of that house. So it's going to stay on the inside. So it's going to say -2 times square root of 10, and we are going to box that up. Now let's bust out my calculator and see what a square root of -40 number looks like, and then we're just going to multiply by -1 in the front. So that's going to say, oops, I want a calculator. There you go. Clear this out. Remember, my calculator, I have to punch in the 40 first. So 40, and then I have to hit the square root. So if you see that you have 6.32, make sure you mess around with the calculator to see if your calculator, you need to punch in the 40 first or the radical first, okay? So go back to my paper and type in, remember we have a negative in the front, so make sure now we write -6.32. So our decimal approximation is -6.32.